A woman said if she saw me, she would stab me to death because I defended President Trump in front of the Senate. Was that if the case against Trump is as strong as the anti-Trump zealots claim it is, everything should be produced, nothing should be hidden, nothing should be kept under wraps, and the trial should be moved to a location where all Americans think he could get a fair trial, not in the two districts in America that are most anti-Trump, the District of Columbia and Manhattan, and not in front of a judge who has already expressed views and been in a law firm that has represented and been of counsel with Hunter Biden. If there's a strong case, do it fairly so that not only is justice done, but it's seen to be done. And that's what I'm calling for in my book, Trump. In the book, I went through each of the cases against Trump and showed that none of them hold water. And yet there have been 3 indictments already, and there'll probably be a 4th one coming out of Fulton County in Georgia. Walter Cronkite couldn't get a job in major media because he was too balanced. He would present both sides of every issue and let you decide for yourself. We don't hear that. We hear one side presenting only one side, the other side presenting only the other side, and many people listen to only one side, and they think that people who express another view must be crazy because they haven't heard it before, because the media doesn't present conflicting views. Thankfully, your show tries to present a counter narrative. That's what we need in America today, the marketplace of ideas.
All right, we're going to dive into the Trump on trial news. Gateway Pundit is reporting that President Trump is calling out the January 6th committee for illegally destroying their records and documents now that he has full subpoena power. But the article also refers to a recent interview with Dr. Jan Halper Hayes, a portion of which we played right here on Counter Narrative, where she says that Trump already has it all. He already has plenty of evidence. So we need some clarification on if this is a true characterization of what is going on, but also it raises some other questions. Why would the January 6th committee want to destroy anything if there's no question the former president was involved in an insurrection? So to weigh in on this and more is Alan Dershowitz. He's a #1 New York Times bestselling author, one of America's most respected legal scholars. He was the youngest full professor in Harvard Law School history, where he's now the Felix Frankfurter Professor of Law Emeritus. Dershowitz has advised presidents, prime ministers, and represented many prominent men and women, half of them pro bono. And we're also talking about his new book today, Get Trump, The Threat to Civil Liberties, Due Process, and Our Constitutional Rule of Law, analyzing the unremitting efforts by political opponents of Donald Trump to get him, to stop him from running in 2024 at any cost. So many things I want to dive into with you, Alan Dershowitz. First of all, thank you so much for coming on with me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. My book presents a counter narrative, and I think there's no time which it's been more important to have counter narratives than there is today, because we lack nuance, we lack discussion. Each side presents its narrative as if it's the absolute truth and doesn't want to hear the counter narrative. So thank you for having a counter narrative show.
Well, it's so important. Like I said, I mean, I'm a longtime journalist, and to see what's happened to media in general, to where you only have one accepted narrative and you can't just have a balanced side of here's this idea, here's this idea, and we're going to respect our audience enough to make the decision for themselves. It's like that's gone completely out the window. But I'm glad that you appreciate the concept, and I appreciate what you're doing, especially the fact overarching, and we're going to get into this a little bit later, but the fact that you yourself have a lot of different political opinions, many of them opposed from Donald Trump, yet you're standing up for his constitutional rights. So, I mean, that in itself is incredible. And I do want to talk to you about that. But since I introduced this whole new story of the January 6th committee destroying records, again, I'm seeing a lot of those salacious words that we see in news now, like from now the right side, where they're saying they illegally destroyed these records and this is obstruction of justice. And so, I mean, if it is, okay, fair, but I need to hear from you. What do you think about that?
Well, nobody should ever destroy records, period. History has its claims, and committees, particularly of the House, should never, ever try to bury records. It's enough that they try to seal them, and at least there you can go to court and get them unsealed. But once you've destroyed records, often they're irretrievable. So let's get to the bottom of it. Let's find out if there were records that were destroyed. Look, my view is that if the case against Trump is as strong as the anti-Trump zealots claim it is, everything should be produced, nothing should be hidden, nothing should be kept under wraps, and the trial should be moved to a location where all Americans think he could get a fair trial, not in the two districts in America that are most anti-Trump, the District of Columbia and Manhattan, and not in front of a judge who has already expressed views and been in a law firm that has represented and been of counsel with Hunter Biden. If there's a strong case, do it fairly so that not only is justice done, but it's seen to be done. And that's what I'm calling for in my book, Trump. In the book, I went through each of the cases against Trump and showed that none of them hold water. And yet there have been 3 indictments already, and there'll probably be a 4th one coming out of Fulton County in Georgia. And so, every day on my show, I have a show called The Dersh Show. I give bananas out. And the question is, how close are we becoming to a banana republic? I think we're up to 3 on a scale of 10. I hope we never get above 5 because we're not there. We're not a banana republic. But when the president of the United States tells friends, and then it's leaked to the New York Times, I think Garland's going too slow. He's acting like a ponderous judge. I want him to prosecute the man who's running against me to replace me as president. That earns you a banana.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no question. And again, it's so refreshing that someone that is on the other opposite side of the political aisle from Trump can at least fairly say that. Do you think it's too far with this latest news of them destroying this January 6th committee documents? Do you think it's too far to say that that's obstruction of justice on their part, or no?
Well, obstruction of justice is a very, very vague term. We know that Hillary Clinton destroyed documents, some of which may have been under subpoena. She claimed they were all personal documents about appointments with her hairdresser, but we'll never know because they were destroyed. If the evidence has been destroyed and is not retrievable, then you have to assume they had something to hide. Today, with technology, most destroyed evidence is retrievable. So it depends on the facts, and let's get to the bottom of it. We shouldn't be just talking from the point of view of what we want to happen. We should talk from the point of view of what actually did happen. And there's a clear answer to that. Either the records were destroyed or they weren't. President Trump now has subpoena power. His lawyers can call these people if they're relevant and put them under oath, subject to perjury prosecution, and use the tools of the adversarial system, cross-examination, etc.
You've been very matter of fact about the concerns that this raises, no matter which side of the political aisle you're on. And again, you're able to put your own political opinions aside and talk about the danger of what's happening, the precedents that could be set. Why do you think there's not more Democrats who can put those political differences aside and speak on this objectively? Do you think it's just, I mean, you've been attacked. Anybody that tries to speak fairly is incredibly attacked or smeared in the media. Do you think that's part of the reason more won't speak up?
Well, more than threatened. I've been physically threatened. A woman said if she saw me, she would stab me to death because I defended President Trump in front of the Senate. Even on Martha's Vineyard, where I've lived for 53 years, I came here to defend Senator Ted Kennedy in the Chappaquiddick case. So I've been here 53 years. But since I defended Donald Trump on the floor of the Senate, I've been banned by the library. They allowed me finally to speak to 25 people because I threatened to sue them. Banned by the book fair, even though I've written more books than anybody on Martha's Vineyard. And banned by my local synagogue and banned by the community center. The people in charge just don't want the counter narrative to be heard. They want only one side to be heard. And so, we're living at an age now where free speech is in great danger at universities. And today the danger is coming from the left. When I was growing up, it was coming from the right. I grew up during McCarthyism. I had to defend the right of communists, who I hated. I hated communism, but I had to defend their right to teach at universities when I was a student at Brooklyn College. Today the shoe is on the other foot, and the same people that were against censorship back in the 1950s are now the ones who are doing the censoring.
What do you think about this whole argument of equitable justice? Do you think that we're seeing equitable justice? I mean, every day there's only one side that will report on and truly honestly report on what's happening with the discovery in terms of suspicious activity reports and foreign payments when it comes to the Biden family. There is a special counsel that has been assigned to the Biden family when it comes to the classified documents case, but you hear nothing about what's going on with that, and everything's about Trump. So it does give at least the appearance of that there's no equitable justice. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, I don't think we're seeing both sides presented fairly. But what I'm much more concerned about is today Walter Cronkite couldn't get a job in major media because he was too balanced. He would present
Mhm.
both sides of every issue and let you decide for yourself. We don't hear that. We hear one side presenting only one side, the other side presenting only the other side,
Mhm.
and many people listen to only one side, and they think that people who express another view must be crazy because they haven't heard it before because the media doesn't present conflicting views. Thankfully, your show tries to present a counter narrative. That's what we need in America today, the marketplace of ideas.
Now, here's something that has kind of tripped me up. You have this effort, particularly on the Democratic side, to essentially, and I mean, and some have said so as much, prevent Donald Trump from even being able to run, from even being able to be on the ticket. And they say
Right.
that if Donald Trump were able to get back in office, that would be a threat to democracy. But the thing that I get hung up on is, isn't democracy about allowing the majority of Americans to have a voice? And so if you're going to prevent the majority of Americans from even being able to cast a vote for someone, how is that democratic?
No, you're absolutely right. I like to say that I have a constitutional right to vote against Donald Trump for the third time. I voted against him twice. I intend to vote him against him again. And you have a constitutional right, or anybody else, to vote for him or any other candidate. And our ability to vote for who we think is the best candidate shouldn't be denied by bureaucrats, by the attorney general, by the president, by a judge, or by jurors. So, whether you call it election interference or not, there is clearly an attempt by some radical Democrats to prevent Donald Trump from running. They're now going to bring lawsuits under the 14th Amendment claiming that he's guilty of insurrection and therefore he is constitutionally disqualified from running. The 14th Amendment was designed to prevent people who fought in the Civil War against the North from running. It was not designed to go forward 150 years or more and to prevent a candidate of the Republican Party from running. So I expect there'll be an election. I suspect it'll be Trump versus Biden. I expect to vote for Biden. People will object to that. And you have the right to object to who I'm voting for. And I have a right to object to who you're voting for. And let's see what the elections turn out. But let's not have this impacted by indictment after indictment after indictment. In my book at Trump, I go over each of the indictments. I predicted each of these indictments and I go
Wow.
over them and I show how there's no basis for any single one of them. There are closer cases. The New York case is the most absurd. The Washington, D.C. case is second. The strongest case against him is one incident in Florida where he allegedly waved a piece of classified material in front of a journalist and a publisher and said, I could have declassified this when I was president, but I didn't. That is evidence, but evidence of a relatively minor crime, possession of material that should have been returned after he left office. That's not the kind of case that should be brought against the man running against president, so against the current president. So I don't think any of these cases right now are appropriate.
Well, I cannot wait to read this book of yours. I mean, just even talking to you, it's so refreshing to have your honesty and frankness, even though you're like, look, I'm going to vote for Biden, but I'm still going to defend Trump. I mean, that's just refreshing that you can be frank and that we can have differences of opinion. Imagine that. And still approach what's really important and fundamental about what we're talking about, the danger that our country is in right now in terms of the free speech concerns and in terms of just constitutional rights. I want to dig into one of those latest charges, particularly when it comes to the election January 6th related charges. They're trying to say that Trump basically was of interfering in an election and that he was trying to have different electors, et cetera, et cetera. But we, on the other side of that, can election interference on the other side be brought up or proven? I mean, you had 51 intel agency officers who flat out lied. They knew that the Hunter Biden laptop was authentic and yet still blamed Russia. And that did have an effect on the election and some people's voting habits. So how can, and also just on the electoral thing, I know there was a lot of Democrats that were arguing before in 2016 that maybe they could do alternate electors. So it's alternate electors for them, but it's fake electors when it comes to Trump. I mean, it just makes your head spin.
Well, we know that the way to challenge an election in a system that has the Electoral College under our Constitution is to put up an alternate slate of electors and let the legislature and the courts ultimately decide that. That was what a court held in Hawaii back in the 1960 election, which was Kennedy versus Nixon, the first election I ever voted in. And that's the proper way of doing it. So everything turns on President Trump's state of mind on January 6th and around that time. Did he honestly believe that the election had been stolen? If he honestly believed the election had been stolen, then nothing he did was criminal. The way I like to think about this case is, let's assume for one moment, just assume, it's not correct, but assume for a moment that Donald Trump was right, that the election had in fact been stolen. Assume that it had been stolen. Everything that he did then would be regarded as highly patriotic. Putting up an alternate slate of electors, trying to get the vice president to slow down the process. We would have applauded him if the end result had been, oh my God, he prevented a wrongfully elected person from assuming the presidency, and he got the right person in the Oval Office. And if it's true that had the election been stolen, he couldn't be prosecuted, why doesn't it follow that if he believes the election was stolen, that everything he did in his mind was legal, and therefore it can't be prosecuted as a crime? That's the way I would try to argue the case if I were Trump's lawyer. The January 6th case is an extremely, extremely weak case. The government now claims, the New York Times had a big headline, oh my God, we found the smoking gun. We found a legal memoranda by lawyers how to challenge this election. It seems to me that's the most exculpatory piece of information, that lawyers were thinking about ways. They admit it was a stretch, they admit it's uphill, but that's what lawyers do. I don't get hired in easy cases. I get hired in the toughest cases there is. I'm like the brain surgeon of law. People come to me when they've given up hope. I've been called the lawyer of last resort. And so I push the law, I stretch it, and I win sometimes, not always. But now they're trying to make it a crime to do what I do and what good lawyers do, what Abraham Lincoln did, what John Adams did, what other lawyers have done over the years, try to push the law. What Thurgood Marshall did when he got the Supreme Court to overrule its decision permitting segregated transit and segregated schools. That was not the law at the time that he brought Brown versus Board of Education. He had to stretch and change the law. That's what lawyers do. But now indicting lawyers and indicting people who take legal advice, that's un-American.
I mean, to that note, how do you think that his lawyers are doing? Do you think that he has good lawyers that are doing good by him?
Well, his lawyers are under a tremendous, tremendous pressure. There's this organization called the 65 Project, which announced that it was going to go after any lawyer who defended Trump, and it would try to get them disciplined or disbarred. And I wrote an op-ed saying, my God, that's McCarthyism. And any lawyer who's proceeded against by the 65 Project, I will represent them. So what do you think they did? They filed a bar charge against me, requiring me now to spend lots and lots of money defending
Mm.
myself. I did nothing wrong, but they filed a bar charge against me in order to intimidate me and threaten me. I'm not easily intimidated or threatened. I've been threatened before, and I always fight back. But a lot of lawyers feel intimidated. And I know lawyers who have turned down a request to defend President Trump on the ground that they don't want to be. One of them said, we don't want to be Dershowitz. We don't want to have happen to us what happened to you, people attacking you, people bringing broad charges against me. I'm going to fight back, but some lawyers can't afford to fight back, or they can't afford to lose clients if they are charged with bar complaints. So they're playing, 65 Project is playing unfair, and it's preventing lawyers from defending President Trump under the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution.
Well, we thank you so much for your bravery and being able to be that example. It's so needed. And I mean, we're just going to lose any sense of fair justice if we have lawyers that can be easily intimidated against
Right.
defending the people that need it the most. I want to talk to you about this protective order that Jack Smith was trying to get the judge to approve. It looks like they're giving until at least by Friday, or I guess the end of this week, to talk about that. What do you think about that? I mean, here's a political candidate, and not only are they going after him and he's having to spend his time and resources defending himself, but now they also want to muzzle him. This was reported by NBC.
Right. There shouldn't be any protective orders. There are certain things that can't be disclosed, grand jury minutes, and those already are protected by the law. So the idea of telling Trump that he can't tweet, or telling him that he can't, I mean, he sometimes treats very foolish things. I mean, that childish statement where he said, if you come after me, I'll come after you. Um, we all think that, but Trump often doesn't distinguish between what he thinks and what he says. But all that stuff can be used at trial against him. So you don't need a protective order. I don't think there should be a protective order.
Now, you actually went as far as to say that you felt that Jack Smith himself could be indicted. I believe it was for leaving out the statement Trump made on January 6th, peacefully and patriotically. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. I use two examples, not to suggest that he would actually be indicted or could actually be indicted, but to show how far this indictment goes, that under the terms of the indictment, they could indict him on two charges. Number one, he clearly lied to the public when he described the speech of January 6th and deliberately, willfully, maliciously left out the key words, the key qualifying words that President Trump told his viewers and listeners. I want you to protest peacefully and patriotically. When you leave out those words, you lie. It's a lie of commission. The other thing is the fourth count of the indictment says that he can be prosecuted under a Ku Klux Klan statute, which basically was designed to prevent Klansmen from intimidating newly enfranchised enslaved people. The statute basically says that if two more people conspire to deny anybody their constitutional rights, they're guilty. Well, what if the court were to hold that Trump had a constitutional right to say what he said and do what he did? Would that mean that Smith himself was guilty of violating that very statute because he would have agreed with another person to deprive Trump of his constitutional right? So I use that as an example only to show how extreme the indictment is and how far it goes and how dangerous it is for people expressing views different than the views that are expressed by the current administration.
Speaking of people expressing different views and having a counter narrative than the one that we're fed, we have another presidential candidate, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. There's been a major media smear campaign in regard to everything that he says. If you really look at what he says, I would determine it as, from a journalist, a mischaracterization in a lot of respects. Do you think that there's a lot that can be said with RFK Jr. as far as this free speech precedent as well?
Yeah.
Same concerns with Trump?
Yes. Well, Bobby's an old friend of mine. I've known him for years and years and years. I knew his father. I worked on his father's campaign in 1968 when he was tragically murdered. I was ironically working on matters of gun control for then presidential candidate Bobby Kennedy, who I knew. And I've known Bobby since he's a young person. He's controversial. He's provocative. But, you know, for example, people accuse him of being anti-Semitic. That's just a blatant lie. Bobby is more pro-Israel and more philo-Semitic, more friendly with Jews and supportive of Jewish values than almost anybody else in politics. But because things were taken out of context,
Mhm.
they made that false accusation, and I defended him against it. Rabbi Shmuley Boteach defended him against it. Look, I'm not going to vote for Bobby Kennedy. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. And I think a lot of Democrats are frightened of Bobby Kennedy because they think he'll take votes away from Joe Biden. He probably would. But you fight fair. You don't fight dirty. You don't call somebody an anti-Semite. First of all, it's a terrible thing to use the term anti-Semite promiscuously. It's a very serious accusation to make against somebody. And it should only be made against somebody who genuinely hates the Jewish people or hates the Jewish state because it's Jewish, and Bobby doesn't fit into any of those classifications.
Now, you keep on saying that you would put your support behind Joe Biden. So I got to challenge you here a little bit. It's
Sure.
his administration that is kind of, well, not kind of, it's his administration, his federal agencies that are spearheading some of this inequitable justice. And, there's concerns about his age. There's concerns about all of this foreign payments coming in. I mean, does any of that give you pause? Is there any part of you that thinks that maybe they'll switch him out and put in a different candidate?
Of course, it gives me pause. In the 60 something years I've been voting, I don't think I've ever voted for a candidate who hasn't given me pause. I usually vote for the better alternative or sometimes the least worse alternative. I've never voted for a candidate who satisfied, all of the criteria that I would have for a president. There are a lot of things that Joe Biden has done which I disagree with, and there are a lot of people on the Democratic side, particularly among the squad and people on the hard left, that give me more pause. I am not loyal to the Democratic Party. I will vote as easily for a Republican as for a Democrat. I'm loyal to the Constitution. I'm loyal to my country. I love America. It saved my family from the Holocaust. And I'll do anything to support our Constitution. And it doesn't matter to me whether it helps the Democrats or helps the Republicans. And I'll vote for whoever I think is the best or the least worst candidate. And I could easily vote for a Republican if I thought a Republican, on balance, would do better. I also look at the party platform. I support a woman's right to choose. I support gay rights. I support reasonable climate control, reasonable gun control, separation of church and state. These are all parts of the Democratic platform, not parts of the Republican platform. So both sides give me pause. And in the end, I balance. And I vote. When I voted in the last election, my wife wasn't sure who I'd be voting for. And we voted absentee because we were away. And so my wife insisted on videotaping me filling in the place where I voted for Biden because she wasn't sure who I'd vote for. But I voted for Biden, and I plan to vote for him again. But who knows? Things could change. And if they do, I have an open mind. I always accept the counter narrative along with the narrative.
Well, I wish we had more time because I would love to dig more into that, but maybe another time.
Sure.
There was one more thing I wanted to hit before we finally remind folks to get your book. Rand Paul is just escalated this fight with Dr. Fauci to hold him criminally accountable. He's accusing him of not being honest as far as the testimony with the gain of function. He said he recommended he be criminally charged. The DOJ did nothing. So now he is appealing to a top prosecutor in DC. Any thoughts on that?
I like Fauci. I thought he did a very good job. Was he perfect? No. What I learned, one thing I learned about Fauci, which really
Okay, you
made
like
me
him,
like
but
him
did he
even more.
lie? Did he lie about the
No,
gain of
I have
function?
not. I have not seen anything like that. When I was a basketball player in high school, we used to play in a league that was. I was in a Jewish school and he was in a Catholic school, and he played basketball about the same time I did. He was a better ball player. Look, he had a very hard job. I commend him for his efforts during the COVID issue. I do not think he should be criminally prosecuted. Of course. I think he should be commended and honored. Was he perfect? No. Did he make some mistakes? Obviously, but that's human nature. Human beings make mistakes. I don't think he was in any way negatively motivated, and I think on balance, he did a very good job.
Well, you don't think he lied. I think he lied. But here's the thing: we can agree to disagree on that. You have your narrative. I have my counter narrative.
And I
Not
can
even
be
nearly
persuaded.
enough
If
time.
you give me facts, I might change my mind. I have an open mind.
Yeah,
I have
and of
no
course,
dog in the
we don't
fight.
have enough
I just
time for
want to
that
see justice.
today.
Yeah,
But yeah, maybe in the future when you make another
right.
appearance. Now, I do want to encourage folks because again, I appreciate that we're able to sit here and have these discussions and have open minds. And I appreciate that you do not support Donald Trump, but you've written this book, Get Trump, pointing out just how dangerous this situation we're in, the threat to civil liberties, due process, and our constitutional rule of law. Very confident that we're going to get your honest take and your frankness in this book. So looking forward to digging into that. And people can get it from Amazon. They can get it straight from Skyhorse Publishing, right?
Yeah, but they can't get it in bookstores. It's been banned on Martha's Vineyard. They wouldn't allow me to sell it at the book fair. It's not being sold in any bookstores. It was the #1 nonfiction Amazon bestseller for a period of time, and yet you couldn't get it in local bookstores. They did not want to carry a title called Get Trump. So if you want to support the Constitution, you go on Amazon and Get Trump. That's the best way, in my view, at least in this context, to support the counter narrative, constitutional law, and the rule of law.
And the fact that it was banned might just be your best selling position. That will make people want to get it even more. Well, I really enjoyed this. I hope to have you on again, Alan. Really
That would be
refreshing
great.
to speak.